Time now to visit London, where Juliana Olayinka is standing by for today's market headlines. Good morning, Juliana. It's good to see you. Now, Boris Johnson will be questioned by senior MPs later today amid continued calls for his top advisor to resign. Will this not be a distraction from the fight against COVID-19?
Cummings, he's very senior aide, is right at the centre of the COVID-19 and the government response, and whether or not there's enough transparency and whether or not Boris Johnson's cabinet can indeed be trusted to handle the pandemic. Of course, this Dominic Cummings row comes amidst him taking two trips, one 250 miles away to his parents' house, another 50 miles away to a beauty spot at Bernard Castle, and he isn't the only individual within the cabinet that's been charged with doing so. There are several other individuals that have also been caught flouting the law, as some would say. And I think today is going to be a particularly tough day for the Prime Minister, because this is the first time that he will be facing the Labour opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, and will also have a barrage of questions from MPs, albeit remotely, about this situation. We still have the second highest death rate in the world. There are certain areas of how we're going to ease the lockdown that haven't yet been fully understood. So Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under a lot of pressure. Dominic Cummings, his chief aide, is hoping to think that this only affects the Westminster bubble, that outside of the Westminster bubble, nobody really cares. But of course, we've seen some figures from latest polls suggesting that actually the public do care, and it shouldn't be one rule for the elite and another rule for the masses.
The Bank of England chief economist makes a U-turn to say that UK recession may not be as bad as feared. What has Andy Holden seen differently this time?
What Holden has seen is the flash PMI data which we had last week, and it did show that there is some sort of recovery. The Bank of England, as well as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, they both suggested that in Q2 GDP could fall as much as 25%, which is almost unheard of, and it would be the worst recession that Britain has faced in hundreds of years. But that flash PMI did show that there is some optimism, there is an uptick, there is some sentiment coming back in construction and manufacturing. Of course, now we've heard from the Prime Minister, and he has asked non-essential businesses to open on the 15th of June, so more people will be spending again. So Halding was giving a speech at a webinar hosted by the Confederation of British Industry yesterday, and he said, looking at the data that we're seeing in real time, it doesn't appear that it will be as bad as people had expected. Of course, in March, there was a fall in GDP by 5.8%. So it's good news. It's a U-turn. Governments and banks do U-turns. If it's a good thing, then it's good news. So yes, I think the markets were pretty happy with his sentiment.
I'm sure some good news would do at this time. In other news, Juliana, the UK government has proposed delaying the UN Climate Change Conference COP26 by a year. Is it all about COVID-19?
Of course, it's all about COVID-19. Everything at the moment, I'm afraid, Bissy, is all about COVID-19, and particularly with a gathering like COP26. If you remember in 2015, when there was a Paris Climate Accord, not only did it have heads of state, government leaders, captains of industry, it was a mass gathering. And with climate change and the whole climate emergency, there are so many differing opinions. I don't think it's something you can necessarily have over Zoom or any of those other social networks where people are discussing or having their meetings. So the UN's body that's working on COP26, they will be meeting today. The British government have already issued a date, which I believe is between the 1st and the 12th of November next year, for them to have the gathering, and the UN will make up their minds. Also as well, on the downside of COVID-19, all of the world's governments are dealing with the COVID pandemic and how the fallout is affecting their economy. And so I do believe it will be very, very difficult for them to make any economic suggestions or plans during the time it was supposed to take place, which is November this year, if they haven't seen the full picture of how they're likely to recover from the consequences of coronavirus.
Thank you, Juliana. See you again at 1:30.